Most lifters think they need a new routine or new exercises to grow, but often it's actually just a few small changes in how you lift that make the biggest difference. These 7 techniques can completely change how your training feels and how much muscle you get from it. Some come straight from the research, whereas other tips come from years of coaching experience. But I think all of them do work. Here's my first tip. The first cue I'd recommend you try is called catching the stretch. Let me explain. Think of the lowering or eccentric phase of your movements. Are you going down at a uniform speed? If so, that is a decent approach. However, there might be a slightly smarter way to approach it. Use the speed at which you go to emphasize different parts of the movement. Think about this. To control the eccentric more, you need to produce more force, right? So, if you control the movement more at different portions of the movement, you can emphasize how much force you're producing at different parts of the movement, and therefore at different muscle lengths. So what would happen if you went a bit faster at the start of the lowering phase and then slowed down as you reached into the full stretch? That's right, you would emphasize the stretch position more by producing more force in the stretch. So here's the way I think about it. I catch the stretch. I go relatively fast on the way down at the start of the eccentric and then slow down gradually as I reach into the full stretch, naturally transitioning into a pause in the full stretch. This is likely a smarter way to approach the eccentric phase. Don't count the number of seconds, but use it as a tool to emphasize the stretch. After all, the research hasn't actually shown a benefit to slower eccentrics categorically. A meta-analysis we recently conducted on tempo found that slower eccentrics weren't actually better for growth. In addition, catching the stretch not only makes theoretical sense, we have a lot of research on the stretch showing it's beneficial for growth, it can also make many lifts feel a bit better or safer when you control the deep stretch a bit more. For example, if you're doing a preacher curl, controlling the stretch a bit more, so really slowing down in that position, can make the movement feel substantially safer, better, and as a result, often allow many lifters to push that lift harder. It also usually reduces how much weight you can use, which can be helpful in the context of training in a home gym or just with limited weight available. It makes theoretical sense. In practice, I've noticed many lifters benefit from it on movements they feel a bit unsafe in, and it can also be helpful when you have limited weight available. On the flip side, the second cue I really recommend is explode. Specifically, explode at the start of the rep. And there's a few reasons why I think this is beneficial, ranging from practical to theoretical based on the research. First, we have quite a bit of research on strength specifically, comparing internal cues, like focus on the target muscle, focusing on my muscle connection, to external cues, like being explosive. In these studies on strength development, 1. People are stronger when using external cues, like explode. And 2, over the long run, focusing on external cues usually leads to better strength gains. Now, I hear you saying, shouldn't we be focusing on my muscle connection instead when it comes to growth? And the truth is, we don't know, because we have only one study comparing an external cue like explode to an internal focus, like the my muscle connection. And that study had relatively mixed results on the whole. So when you consider all the research finding benefits in terms of motor unit recruitment, strength development, acute strength performance, I personally think exploding makes a lot of sense, even in the context of hypertrophy. And there's even more reasons for this. The second reason for this, if you explode out of the bottom position, you're actually creating more tension in the stretch. Again, using tempo to emphasize the stretch. And the third reason I like it is in my personal lifting experience and my coaching experience, focusing on being explosive gives you a much better measurement tool to check how close to failure you are. Because if you're trying to be explosive on every single rep, how fast you're actually able to lift the weight becomes much more indicative of how close to failure you are. Because after all, the closer to failure you get, the more your force production drops, and the less fast you're able to move the weight. So for all those reasons, I think exploding makes theoretical and practical sense. Try that cue for your concentrics and let me know how it goes. The third cue is specifically for pull downs, and that is chest up. You see, in my coaching experience, many lifters cheat the last bit of the pull down by involving their abs. If you look at the reps from the side, this becomes very apparent. When they get the bar down to about their forehead or nose level, you'll notice their spine or their chest kind of comes down. And that's because that's the hardest part of the movement, and they really want to get the bar down all the way to their chest. However, this movement of kind of collapsing your chest downwards is spinal flexion, which is what your abs are responsible for. This in no way targets your lats. So the cue chest up fixes this. This allows you to keep your lat pull down as a lat movement and not so much an ab movement. On the flip side, my fourth cue is round the back, specifically for cable rows. One super common mistake I see on cable rows is cheating them using the Arnold technique. When you see Arnold do cable rows, you'll see he leans forward a ton. And there is a benefit to this, but there's also a meaningful drawback, which we can fix. Here's the benefit. When he leans forward, he typically rounds his spine. This stretches out the spinal erector muscles, which are muscles running up and down your spine, giving your back a ton ton of thickness when developed. Then when he rows, he re-extends his spine, dynamically training those muscles and growing them over time. However, this isn't all Arnold does. He also leans forward, flexing his hips more and extending them when he reps it out. And the truth is that hip extension is something your hamstrings, adductors, and glutes are responsible for. So he's not just involving more back muscle, he's also involving his lower body muscle, which isn't really the intention here. The intention should be back development, not subpar glute, hamstring, and adductor stimulus. So how do we fix that? We use the cue round the back. Instead of just leaning forward, focus on crunching down, like during a cable crunch, and then extending the back on the way up. You should feel a deep contraction in your lower back muscles without feeling your hamstrings, glutes, and adductors. This is going to take some getting used to, because most people have never thought about how to move their spine, and specifically their lumbar spine, but keep at it. Use the cue round the back on the way down, and extend the back on the way up, and you'll get used to it. Before we go into the next cue, which is a cue to fix a common mistake I see all the time on ladder raises, a word from today's sponsor. If you want to make these techniques part of a complete science-based training plan, that's exactly what I designed MyoAdapt for. It builds your program around the same research I talked about here, adjusting your volume, intensity, and exercise selection automatically based on your progress and recovery. Each exercise has clear instructions with videos to make sure your technique has you progressing as fast as possible. Go to myoadapt.com and use code WOLF for a free 2-week trial, so you can try it before you commit. The next cue is simple, but it's a really effective one. Grind through. When trying to hit failure, many lifters will just feel when a rep gets hard and stop, not even try to beat that range of motion. The range of motion naturally drops off, but the reps often only take a second or two. And while you might think that's failure, it's probably not. Because to truly know whether or not you've reached failure, you need to give each rep a proper attempt. Spend a few seconds grinding through that sticking point, whatever it is. Getting to say maybe just shy of parallel, grinding through for a few seconds, and just keep going. Because oftentimes you will surprise yourself and be able to get that rep. And you wouldn't have known that if you just come back down without really grinding through. So when you next go to failure, I want you to think of really grinding through the sticking point. Even if you think you're about to fail, commit to spending several seconds grinding through that sticking point. This also and especially applies to lengthened partials or lengthened supersets, where you do lengthened partials after failure. When you do a dumbbell ladder raise and you can't get a full range of motion rep anymore, keep doing partials, but don't just come back down instantly. Go to the sticking point, whatever that is at that point in the set, grind through for a few seconds, see if you can't get even more up, and then come back down, and repeat. Every rep should take at least a few seconds as an attempt. I promise you, this will redefine the meaning of training intensity to you. And for many people, this will make their training way more effective on a set-per-set basis. The next cue is specific to Romanian deadlifts and good morning variations, and that's hips back to the wall. You see, Romanian deadlifts or hip hinges for your hamstrings are supposed to lock your knees for hamstring emphasis. Because the hamstrings are biarticular muscles, they're knee flexors and hip extensors, if you let your knees move, all of a sudden, yet again, you're shortening them at one joint and lengthening them at another. And it also prevents them from forcefully contracting throughout the movement. And here's the problem. Many lifters during the Romanian deadlift and other hip hinges don't lock their knees properly. In fact, I would say there's an epidemic of people twitching their knees at the bottom of a hip hinge, removing hamstring emphasis. Here's a way to check if your RDL technique is bad. Use a side angle. And if your hips ever go down versus just straight back, you need to fix it. The way to fix it, at the start of every rep, think hips straight back to the wall behind you. Your hips should only ever move back and forward, never down and up. That is a sign that you're properly doing a hip hinge. And that applies even at the bottom of the movement. Many people at the bottom of the movement will allow their hips to drop gently and come back up. That is going to remove emphasis in the stretch position and make the movement easier overall. It's simply a way to cheat the movement. As an addition, you can use the cue before every rep to stick the butt out. This can really make it easier mentally to focus purely on hip flexion and extension, because you've already started that movement before even starting a rep. The final cue is for squats specifically, and it's hips forward, shoulders back, specifically if you struggle with a good morning squat. You see, most people squat for quad development, glute development, and adductor development. What happens with a good morning squat? You hit the bottom, you start coming back up, and all of a sudden, your knees shift back and your hips shoot way back. What's happening here is that your body is reducing the moment arms for your quads while increasing the moment arms for your hip extensors, effectively shifting the load from your quads towards your glutes and adductors. And so all of a sudden, you've turned a movement that is actually excellent for quads, glutes, and adductors into one that's only excellent for glutes and adductors. And so for better quad development, you should stay in your knees. My preferred cue for this is once you start ascending in the squat, think hips forward, shoulders back. This will naturally rectify the good morning squat into a more normal position that is more effective for the quads in the squat. Alternatively, in the hole, you can also think knees forward. This accomplishes the same thing. By staying in your knees, you're maintaining that momentum on the quads, forcing them to produce more force. Those are the 7 cues I highly recommend trying in your training for better gains. If you would rather have direct guidance, I also offer one-to-one coaching, where I personally oversee your training, nutrition, and progression. You can book a call using the link in the description. Spots are limited. And as always, shout out to Rascal Apparel for supporting the channel. I wear their stuff in nearly every video. It's comfortable, durable, and actually looks good outside the gym too. You can use code WOLF through the link below to support the channel and grab a discount. If you found this video helpful, drop a like, subscribe, and let me know which of the 7 techniques you're going to try first. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in that next one.